Moderator, in his speech, the Assembly Business Convener asked the question, how many light bulbs does it take to change the church? The Assembly Trustees believe that their report contains a number of light bulb moments that the Church of Scotland has to take seriously if it is to be the force for mission that is our hope and prayer. Building on the remarkable imagination and adaptability shown during the pandemic, each of us must concentrate now our energies on reshaping every aspect of our church life. In accordance with the instructions of the General Assembly of 2019, we have streamlined the central administration, but that will be for nothing unless we complete the work of reforming our presbyteries as the planners of mission and implementing a radical reshaping of the local church around a realistic and affordable number of ministries. We bring before the Assembly today Giving to Grow, a transparent and realistic way of paying for ministry. Also for paying for the core funding of new presbyteries and paying for the wider work of the church. But Giving to Grow will only work if we use it to fund the very different kind of church which we are pointing to in our report. The trustees know the financial plight of the local church, so we have reduced central costs by 30%, and we will use £11 million of our reserves this year and at least a further £5 million in the coming year to reduce pressure on congregations and help recovery from the pandemic. As never before, we say that we are in this together as a church. There is no us and them, local church, presbytery, general assembly, national office. All of us are members of local congregations which will experience both the pain and the exhilaration of the changes that are ahead of us. But moderator, as you have already said today, there is no challenge in front of us greater than the power behind us. Moderator, I present the report of the Assembly Trustees and I move the deliverance.
Seconded. Thank you very much. Are there any questions to the convener? Yeah. I have a point here from one of our youth representatives, Bethany Pringle from Stirling. Bethany?
Thank you, moderator. Bethany Pringle, 758. Just a question about the listening project. As the listening project was unable to hear from anyone under the age of 16, this means that the voice of many young people in the church were only heard secondhand or not at all. And my question is, are there any plans for future listening projects or anything similar which would allow the church to hear stories in detail directly from that group?
Good read it.
The answer to the question is no, there are no such plans at the moment, but having heard what you have said and having discovered that the listening project itself was a useful exercise, then there may be good cause for us to go back to the drawing board and think again about whether we should extend that programme in some other way.
Thank you. There be no further questions. I have no requests to speak on 1, 2, 3, 5, 7, or 8. I pause there because 9 is debated on in the context of the Faith Nurture Forum. So I can ask if anyone, and I'm advised that there may be notices of motion, which I'm not quite sure if, I'll just check, come up yet on my screen. But if I take it down to 8 at the moment, are there any other requests to speak on, I have requests on 4 and 6, but are there any requests on 1, 2, 3, 5, 7, and 8? I'll give you 30 seconds to register any requests.
Perhaps during that 30 seconds, I could ask that if anyone is registering a notice of motion, it's actually helpful to the behind-the-scenes tech if you also make a request to speak, and then that ensures that the moderator knows that it's not to be fast-tracked. So if you're lodging a notice of motion, if you also click request to speak, that will simplify the process. Yes.
Thank you very much. As I'm aware that I think there are some other notices of motions further down, I will therefore declare under the fast track that 1, 2, 3, 5, 7, and 8 are carried. I'll deal with the other fast tracks when we get there. And the next one where we actually have a request to speak is on motion number 4, where I have a request from Brian Kerr from Lanark. Brian?
Moderator, thank you. Kerr 194. I asked, and I'm grateful to the Assembly Trustees and the General Treasurer's Department for providing figures earlier on in the week when I asked a fairly technical question on the level of consultancy fees or fees to outside bodies that were paid by the church for things that we perhaps don't have the staff internally to do it. We're all facing, we know the church is facing a challenging financial time. We know there has been a voluntary exit scheme where we have lost a number of key staff within that. And I'm grateful that this deliverance talks, or this motion talks about budgetary prudence, because we do need that. I asked about how much had been paid in consultancy in each of the last 3 years and what is planned over the next few. In 2018, it was £570,000 that went out to external bodies and consultants. That has reduced significantly, and I'm grateful that I'm certain that Dr. Chalmers will say that he would welcome that and he will continue to ensure that it's kept in check. But when we're faced with challenges about presbytery restructuring, we're faced with challenges about trying to convince people that the Giving to Grow project and mechanism is going to be helpful. At the start of the pandemic, when we were all at 6s and 7s, one of the emails that came out to ministers and deacons was, "We're thinking about you, but you need to try and get your people to continue to give." And that can be difficult when people don't really know what it is they're giving to. The Giving to Grow seems to address that, but also we need to make sure that we still have that budgetary prudence. In one instance of outside consultancies, a sum of £120,000 in 1 year was given for a new electronic payroll system. In 2018, it didn't produce any results for external or internal pay slips until March of this year. We've got to try and work at what we're doing, and we've got to try and look at what we can do as a church, not by paying other people to do it, but looking at where our staff skills are and looking at how we best use our resources. I'm sure people are going to tell me that that was money well spent and that was the best use of resource. I'm not entirely convinced that everyone in the pew would agree with that. So whilst I welcome this section of deliverance, and whilst I hope that the Assembly Trustees will continue to have budgetary prudence in the years that lie ahead. Please, can we try and make sure that we have less reliance on outside contractors and more reliance on the skills, gifts and talents of the people within our staff team, within the ministry and within the eldership and wider membership of our church? Moderator, thank you.
Thank you very much, Brian. Does Dr. Chalmers wish to reply?
I don't suppose that was really so much a question as a comment with which I would agree. So long as I'm upright, standing and breathing, we will be prudent in the way in which we spend money. In fact, the Assembly Trustees have been formed in such a way as to be absolutely certain that going forward we are prudent about our spending. I would also say, however, that there will always be a need for outside expertise and advice that we do not carry in-house and that we wouldn't want to carry in-house. But we are putting in place stringent ways in which future expenditure all round will be accounted for, including the need for signing off any amount of expenditure within the national offices over £10,000. And so we're looking at ensuring that sort of prudence. And I would say that overall, our governance costs, our charity, the costs of running the charity are well within the limits that you would expect of any good charity. But we can do better. And if, as I say, as long as I'm around, we will try to do so.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chalmers. We must now proceed to vote on section 4. If you have your voting buttons ready, the voting is now open. Voting is now closed. That is overwhelmingly carried. The next section on which we have debate is on section 6. And can I invite Mr. Kenneth Elliott from Prestwick?
Kenneth Elliott, 146. While delighted that the Act to Net Union was passed regarding the new presbytery of the southwest of Scotland, can I say that as Presbytery Clerk there, and I'm sure I also speak for the other 5 presbyteries, great frustration, I have to say, was experienced and continues over the lack of clarity with regards to how these presbyteries will be resourced. And I do have great sympathy for the convener with the task that lies ahead. But I wonder if I can ask John to briefly explain why it's taking so long to provide confirmation about how the new presbyteries will be funded. And a supplementary question, what criteria has already been applied to funding those presbyteries already united, such as Fife, Clyde, Aberdeen and Shetland?
Dr. Chalmers.
That's quite a set of questions. And of course, we've got to look at the fact that we joined this process when some negotiations were well on their way and well done towards completion. And so we had to address this in a fairly ad hoc way at the beginning. And we set aside something like £150,000 in order to assure that there would be start-up costs for the new presbyteries that were moving ahead immediately. Then we had to start to think about what constituted the core cost of a presbytery that we might like to fund from the giving of congregations through the maintenance of the ministry scheme. And in that regard, we we're starting to look at a figure of around £120,000 for each presbytery, which allows for core staffing and some objects expenditure. That said, however, we have to remember that right now, presbyteries are funded from that amount of money which never comes near the maintenance and ministry fund, but stays at the moment with congregations. So out of the money that stays with congregations, about £1.1 million goes into the running of the current presbyteries. And so somehow going forward, we have to find a way in which that money reappears in the future structure of presbyteries, together with the core funding that will come from the new maintenance of the ministry scheme. It's quite complex too, because at the moment, when you look at those presbyteries which are coming together, then often there's huge disparity, for instance, between the amount of presbytery dues paid by one presbytery and paid by another, the amount of funding that some presbyteries already have in the bank, in investments, and the fact that some have nothing. So what we've done as a trustee body is say that as we go forward and as each of these new presbyteries begin to come on stream, we may have to tailor our response for each situation as it comes along. Context is incredibly important, and there is, for instance, the possibility that one or two presbyteries might be presbyteries that need to be subsidised in a greater way than others, and some presbyteries that will find that it's easier for them to raise the funding themselves. So we're flexible and open because we know that one size doesn't fit all.
Thank you very much. We now proceed to vote on section 6. Are your buttons ready? And the voting is open. Voting is closed, and I declare that section 6 is overwhelmingly carried. I said I took requests to speak up till 8 because 9 is going to be dealt with in the context of the Faith Nurture Forum report. Therefore, I have requests on 15, 16 and 17, but if anyone wishes to speak on 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 18, 19 or 20, will they please indicate now? 30 seconds. Having received no further requests to speak, I declare 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 18, 19 and 20 carried under the first fast-track procedure. We will now go on to section 15, where I have a new section being proposed by Iona Kimmett, 754. Iona, please.
754, Iona Kimmett, moderator. My request to speak is not on section 15 as written at the moment, but on a new section 16. Would you like that just now, or would you like to take section 15 first?
Yeah. Thanks very much. We'll deal with 15. It came up here as being as a request to speak on 15, but therefore we'll deal with 15. As I haven't fast-tracked it, I must take a vote. Buttons at the ready, please. Will you please vote for or against section 15? Voting starts now. Section 15 is very clearly carried, And therefore, we will now proceed to the proposed new section. Iona Kimmett, please, your opportunity now to move your new section.
Thank you, Moderator. 754, Iona Kimmett. The new section 16 of Deliverance that I propose is instruct the Assembly Trustees to create a group with strategic oversight on the engagement with and support of under 40s, in line with the Radical Action Plan throughout the Church at a national level. This will be convened by someone who is under 40 and should not be a staff member accountable to a forum or committee of the Church, and should include a balanced membership with a focus on under 40s themselves, and this group should report to the General Assembly of 2022. Like many people who are enthusiastic about the place of under 40s in our church, I have been heartened by the focus on their inclusion in church activities in the last few years, and I know that there is widespread support for this work. However, there seems to me to be a potential danger that these words and thoughts remain just that, and are not developed into long-term action. The aim of this section of Deliverance is to ensure that this does not become our fate. In a somewhat similar fashion to the new Equality, Diversity and Inclusion group, this group would have oversight from a high point to ensure that the youth factor is not dismissed in anything that is relevant to us. I would hope that this group could be made of a majority of people under 40 and include those with central knowledge of the church and how it functions, as well as those who work with children, young people and adults or families in their daily work with the church. They should have the right authority and the support of a reasonable budget to do their work, so that we can ensure that this truly becomes part of the heart of what we as a church are doing, not an afterthought or a small part. We have known for many years that children, young people and young adults may well be the future of the church, but in order to achieve that future, we have to recognise them as part of the church today as well. I move this new section of Deliverance, and I believe that Mark Prova, Commissioner number 478, is willing to second. Thank you, Moderator.
Thank you, and that has come up as seconded. I have not received any notice of anyone else wishing to speak, so Convener.
Moderator, I'm going to resist this, but not because I'm hostile to it, quite the opposite. But I just don't think that this is the way to do this piece of work. I want to engage, and I want the under 40s to be engaged directly in this work. But what's being suggested here just doesn't fit with, I think, the way of working that we were encouraged to adopt in 2019, where, for instance, we were encouraged to enable our talented, gifted, and well-paid staff who do this work to be responsible for it and accountable for it. And so I'm nervous about the way in which this is framed in order to put some of those staff into second place in delivering this, when in fact it's part of their role and a dimension of their work to deliver this. So we're seeking to empower our staff to be involved at the forefront of many of these things. The second thing I want to say is that I have to assure Iona that this is a major initiative for which the Assembly Trustees are directly responsible for ensuring is taken forward, not just by the Assembly Trustees directly, but by the Faith Nurture and the Faith Impact Forums. And this is going to be a huge part of the work of the new head of Faith Action Programme, who's just been put into place and who already has significant ideas about how this work should be taken forward. And I want to see that happen, and I want you to come back to us next year and tell us we've failed if we have failed, but it's not our intention to do so. And I think, lastly, it's not in the gift of the trustees to create groups that report directly to the General Assembly. That's another aspect of this that I'm not really comfortable about. In fact, I think under our new way of working and what we are hoping for within the church is the empowerment of groups to get on with work and not have to bring everything back to the General Assembly for micromanagement. The EDI group, for instance, that was referred to, Equality, Diversity and Inclusion, is a group that's been set up by the trustees that reports to the trustees, for which the trustees are responsible then for reporting to the General Assembly. So, in the interest too of reducing the number of groups that we depend on and doing our work in a much more organic, flexible, collaborative way across all the agencies of the church, you have to take this matter extremely seriously and put it up there as a headline issue, then it's with some reluctance that I'm saying to Iona, no, I'm not accepting this, but I can assure you that this work is at the top of the list and will be done and addressed.
Thank you very much, Convener. Since the Convener started speaking, I got a request to speak, but as the Convener has closed this, I regret I can't take that, but hopefully that it will be possible to come and make a point, maybe under some other point later in our debate. We've heard debate amendment for and against, and we must now proceed to a vote. So can I ask all those in favour of for to press their for button, all those against to press their against button, and voting will start now. Voting is closed, and that is very clearly defeated. Although it did come up on 16, that there was a motion to debate it. I think it may be in the same position we were before, and it's a new section. Therefore, if there's anyone actually on section 16, because that was not fast-tracked, and so before we proceed to the Reverend Christopher Rowe's new section, is there anyone on 16 wishing to speak? I have a request from Elspeth Mackay of Cumbernauld. Elspeth and Sheena Orr, please stand by.
Moderator, number 371, Elspeth Mackay. I've just got a question, please, to the convener. I note that the Assembly Trustees proposed to postpone the disposal of 121 George Street. However, we are, as we're constantly being told, in a very difficult financial situation. I'm asking how much is being intended, in money, how much is being intended to be spent on the maintenance of 121 George Street in the short term? And does this show the most prudent way to conserve funds? Thank you.
Yeah.
A good question. I think nothing pains me more than the fact that we are not bringing a report on this matter to this General Assembly. It's an issue that's been around for too long, but we have to accept that there will be new ways of working beyond this pandemic, and we have to know what kind of premises we will need when we move into a blended way of working. We also have a situation now where the shape and size of the kind of facility we will need in the future is somewhat up in the air, as are the projected value of the kind of properties that we might either move into, or the property that we might move out of. And so, and we also have to consider the fact that staff time and effort has to be prioritised at this moment, and it's not the priority to deal with the property at 121 right now, and nothing pains me more than to say that. We one day soon need to make a decision on this. But in the light of the fact that the future of being in 121 is uncertain, the trustees at their last meeting, or the meeting before last, made it clear that no more than £100,000 would be allocated to essential repairs related to health and safety and wind and watertight would be spent before the end of 2022, by which time we should have a clear indication of what our future plans are for staying or going or developing, heaven forfend, 121 George Street.
Thank you very much. Can I ask Sheena Orr? I apologise, Sheena. I just realised the coding now was a point of order, so maybe we should have actually taken you before. Sheena, and it was, well, Michael Goss, please stand by.
Not at all. Thank you, Moderator Sheena Orr, 021. It's just that seeing from the chat and from my own experience, there has been some sort of frustration with the speed that the voting has been taken, and with the clarity with what we are voting on. And as these are all very important issues, can I ask that we have a bit more time and that people are really clear and have time to know where they have to go to vote? Because you know, I think people feel that they are being rushed into decisions, and also the results of the votes are not being given. So we're not sort of clear on just on what is happening, really. And I appreciate we're all grappling with new technology, and while some of us have been dealing with this for the past year, for others this might be a very new way of dealing with things, but I think it should not be allowed to get in the way of making the decisions that we have to take at this Assembly. Thank you.
Thank you, and I fully understand where you're coming from. If I can perhaps maybe explain, and maybe we need to think about this, that there maybe should be a set period of time. I've been taking it, if I could see what the voting is, and if it gets to 420, there's impossible for the other side to beat it, and that's when I've tended to close.
If we make an offer.
But Principal Clerk's going to make an offer, so we should hear it.
I'm speaking for the Deputy Clerk, who's come up with a very good idea. Moderator, I think if you simply say the numbers, and if you want them minuted, to ask us to minute them.
Yeah.
So we could have a version where you can hear the numbers, and we don't have to spend all our time typing up the numbers, but if you want them minuted, just say so. Yeah. Or if the Assembly wants them minuted, indeed. Or if the Assembly wants them minuted, I think that's our way of proceeding. And it may be, and maybe it's something we could consider as to whether maybe there should be a set time for voting. But as I said, I've tended to close the voting when it's quite obvious that it's almost impossible, given the number of commissioners, that you could get the number that are already there for one side or another overturned. But we'll certainly, I can assure you, it will bear these comments in mind, and I will now announce the results of the vote. And if we want them minuted, or if a member of a commissioner wishes them to be minuted, we will seek to do so. Mike Goss, please.
Thank you, Moderator. 491, Mike Goss. Just to state my, and I suspect I'm not alone in this, my deep disappointment that the convener has already expressed with the delay to a decision on disposing of 121 George Street or otherwise. This is a matter that, as he has said, is hugely urgent, and one that has been before us for quite a long time, past needing to be done. If we manage not to spend more than £100,000, I will be surprised. All buildings have a habit of needing money spent in them for urgent repairs as time goes by. And I really hoped that this whole crisis that we've had in this past year would have given us the opportunity to rent office space in the interim while we explored how our new working partnerships might better be done. So not finalising the space that we will have, but getting rid of the old space in the meantime. I'm very disappointed that we are not pursuing this with any more speed than we are, and I just wanted to express that, and I don't think I'm alone in this thought.
Thank you, Michael. I think it's only fair to say that that request came in after Sheena Orr's request, which was a point of order, and actually that had been after the convener had responded to the substantive debate, and I don't think, convener, you've got anything further to add? No. We'll therefore move to a vote on section 16. Can I ask you to have your for and against buttons ready? And voting is open. Thank you. The numbers seem to have stabilised, and I'll therefore close the vote. And that is carried by 254 votes to 221. Therefore, it is carried. I don't know if there's any request to have that recorded. Now, we will now move, so that's section 16 approved. We will now move to new section to be moved by the Reverend Christopher Rowe.
Moderator, if it would help, the trustees are willing to accept this particular amendment, and I think that Christopher is of a mind not necessarily to speak to it, but I'll leave that to him.
Further complicated by the fact that we have an amendment to Mr. Rowe's new section,
Yeah.
which we need to deal with as well.
Yeah. So if Mr. Rowe's new section is moved and seconded, I will speak to resisting the amendment.
Just to clarify, I'm going to invite Mr. Rowe to speak to his amendment. On the live debate, there is an amendment in the name of the Reverend Pauline Steenbergen, which I understand is, although it comes after 17, is intended to be an amendment to the motion, the amendment. Sorry, the new section rather, that Christopher Rowe is about to move, and therefore I will, after Christopher Rowe has moved his amendment, I will seek any questions to him, and then I will ask the mover of the amendment. Christopher.
Moderator 271, Christopher Rowe. I'm not going to speak at length. I'm grateful to the convener for accepting the proposed addition of a new section. It really is just to put it in that context that a growth fund of £25 million was agreed as part of the Radical Action Plan. That was, I think, understandably by many people put on ice during the current financial difficulties. And this really is an effort not to instruct the Central Church to spend funds that it doesn't necessarily have access to, but to open up the possibility that people can subscribe into that. For those many people in Scotland and possibly abroad who feel that resourcing particular new growth in the church is important, this is simply allowing an opportunity for people themselves and congregations, if they so wish, to pay into a fund that can be used. So I move it in the terms that it appears on the screen, and I'm grateful to the convener for his assistance in agreeing to accept that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to invite the Principal Clerk to read this and then ask for a seconder.
Moderator, Mr. Rowe is proposing a new section 17. Given the urgency of the need to institute new forms of church and to engage in pioneer mission, 1, instruct the Assembly Trustees to establish, as part of the Faith Action Plan, a pioneer mission fund aimed at supporting local church growth, with a particular emphasis on church planting and the establishment of 100 new worshipping communities. 2, encourage wide-ranging support for contributions to be made to this fund, including contributions from individuals, businesses and outside bodies, and as soon as circumstances permit, allocate central financial resources to this important work. And 3, instruct the Assembly Trustees to make appropriate provision for the efficient management and evaluation of the fund and the project it supports.
Thank you very much. Do we have a second? It's seconded. Can I invite any questions to Mr. Rowe? I will now take the amendment. Now move to the amendment from Reverend Pauline Steenbergen. Pauline, please.
(651) Reverend Pauline Steenbergen, Presbytery of England. Greetings from Carlisle, near Annan, moderator. Sisters and brothers, wholeheartedly I welcome Christopher Rowe's new section 17, because as a Kirk, we can't just keep talking about ministry to the margins. Mission and evangelism needs financial backing urgently, money that's equally accessible to every local church, no matter who or where you are. However, I'm simply asking in this amendment that we open the purse wider. The new section and this amendment more fully includes pioneers, those of us not based in one congregation or one local church, not based even in one parish or even in one denomination. Currently, I'm pioneering a new worshipping community that's ecumenical, it's online, it's UK-wide. It's been growing during the pandemic. I'm team leader of a third space fresh expression made in Cumbria, and you can read more about the Cumbrian model in the Ecumenical Relations report. My ministry and mission is in the health and well-being sector, where being Christ's presence is vital in this pandemic. I'm self-employed, relying on donations, trusts, and a legacy from my mum who died in lockdown 1. Let's not do radical mission on breadcrumbs. Therefore, moderator, colleagues, I propose the additional wording that after local church growth, we might add comma, fresh expressions and pioneer practitioners associated with presbyteries. Thank you for listening. My seconder is 491, Mike Goss.
Thank you very much. And I don't think Mike wants to speak. He has seconded. Is there any other requests to speak? Mike, were you wishing to speak?
No, that's fine.
Thank you. Any other requests to speak on the amendment? And Christopher, do you wish to respond to the amendment?
Moderator, only to say that I'm encouraged. I mean, my thought was always that this would be as a wider ranging support to those involved in the new growth that I think so many of us long to see happening in the Church of Scotland. So I am encouraged by that and admire the work that folks are doing on those front lines and would seek that this fund would support that.
Thank you very much. And can I invite the convener, Dr. Chalmers, to speak on the amendment?
I'm going to resist this, not because I'm hostile to it. Once more, I just think that once you start categorising in this way, what you actually do is you don't. You remove the sense of width, and you start to focus in on particular categories. And so this is adding categories to something which was already wide and permissive. And if the kind of projects, the kind of initiatives that the Commissioner is speaking about fall into the scope of this fund, then I don't think we need to name other possibilities for it. as I say, I think that that narrows the focus when you start to name categories in such a way. So I'd like to keep it open. That's the first thing I want to say. And that's what I want to say in reference to the amendment. While I'm on my feet, I may as well speak briefly to the motion itself. We're delighted that it has come. We're delighted to be able to support it. And we're delighted to think that while the Commissioner has gone to great lengths to ensure that somehow or another this will not stress the central funds of the Church, we would like to, that's the trustees, would like to assure the Church that we want to try and find some money in order to at least seed this fund. And it so happens that this year, already in unrestricted, unallocated legacies, we are likely to exceed what we have budgeted for in legacies. And so there's the very real possibility, and in fact, I can stand here and say categorically that we as trustees will put to good use at least one of the unallocated legacies that's around in order to start this fund off, and then to see that there's some progress made in the way that the fund is growing. It's a kind of son or daughter of growth fund, but it's something that we want to support. And we've said all along from the very beginning that we need to prune and plant, we need to cut and invest, and this is one of the areas where we need to invest. And I just finally would say again that I don't think we want to categorize here, but leave the fund as open as possible to those who have imaginative, entrepreneurial and missional initiatives that they want to try and carry out.
Thank you. And now, just to be very clear, we are going to firstly vote on the Reverend Pauline Steenbergen's amendment to the Reverend Christopher Rowe's new section.
Perhaps I should read this into the record as well. So, Pauline Steenbergen is actually asking to amend the proposal by Christopher Rowe by adding fresh expressions and pioneer practitioners associated with presbyteries. So after the words local church growth, add fresh expression and pioneer practitioners associated with presbyteries, and that's the amendment we're voting on just now.
Yeah. So the amendment is what we're voting on, and voting is now open. Please press your buttons. Voting has now closed, and there voted for 142, against 341. So that amendment to the new section is not carried. We will now proceed to the new section, unamended. I think, Dr. Chalmers, you had already replied. Christopher, is there anything further you want to say before I invite Dr. Chalmers? I think everyone's happy with everyone's been said. So we'll now vote on the Reverend Christopher Rowe's new section. Will you please press your buttons, and voting is now open. I think I can close the vote because for is 416 and against is 66. And therefore that new section is carried and added to the deliverance. We had no requests to speak. Well, we didn't fast track, let me say. section 17, so we need to proceed to a vote on section 17. Will you please press your buttons for or against? Voting is open. I'm advised that some people are expressing some difficulty with the Assembly Hub. Can I just ask a little patience, and then if you refresh the Assembly Hub, hopefully we'll get there. There's a point of order from Peter Nimmo. Peter, whilst we're maybe trying to sort this out, invite your point of order.
Thank you, moderator. I was hoping to speak on 17 and my request seems to have disappeared.
It's actually only now come up, I'm afraid.
If we're now voting, then it's gone, so that's...
Apologies, but I think there's teething troubles, which we will... Certainly when I called the vote, there was actually no one. There was nothing there. And likewise, I think Fiona Reid and Christine Murdoch, are they in the same? Or can we actually open it again? Can we open it again, given there has been a problem? Yeah. No, we haven't closed the vote, and I think there may have been some problems. So as the vote is not closed, I am willing to allow, and I mean these names have only now appeared on my screen. I'll call Fiona Reid, and if Peter Nimmo wishes to also speak, we will just go back to there. So section 17, and I invite Fiona Reid to speak. And apologies for these glitches.
Fiona Reid 760. This is just a comment. I'd like to encourage churches who participate in the gift giving day consider donating time, money or resources to other churches struggling to meet their needs if the time that they have is more than sufficient for their own mission needs. Thank you.
Thank you. And Peter Nimmo and then Christine Murdoch, stand by, please.
Thank you, moderator. I just had a question for the convener. The National Gift Day, which is an excellent idea, we should do this during harvest time. And just to ask, what was the logic behind that? I know that many congregations at harvest time nowadays we're collecting for food banks, for example, which is so much part of the church's life now. And I just wondered whether the National Gift Day would be in conflict with that. So I wonder if the convener has an answer to that, please.
I'll invite the convener maybe to speak after we've had there's two other contributions, and if he'd reply to them all. Christine Murdoch and William Crossan, please stand by.
Christine Murdoch, 216. Moderator, I fully support the a day of giving, and I do realise that the Deliverance is only encouraging Kirk sessions to participate in a National Gift Day. However, having discussed this Deliverance locally, my congregations feel that they would not want to give up the support for the local food bank, which they do at harvest time and indeed throughout the year. And there is a worry that with 2 appeals at harvest, there could be a dilution in our giving. And so I'm just asking, could Kirk Sessions have the discretion to choose their own date for a day of giving?
Thank you. And William Crossan, 352. Mr. Crossan.
Thank you, Moderator. I was simply wishing to make the observation that having a single National Gift Day during harvest time is not strictly feasible. I have to wait until the many farmers in my kirk tell me when we can have a harvest Thanksgiving, because it varies from year to year. And it will vary over many parts of the country. It will be different here in the West than it will be over in Fife or in Angus or places like that. So it may not be all that feasible to have a single National Gift Day at a very dispersed harvest time.
Thank you very much. Does the convener wish to respond to these points?
Sorry, Moderator, I'm just getting organised here. First of all, the idea was one that was in the air and being planned by the stewardship team pre-pandemic. So it's been in the stocks for quite some time. And I think they realise, and so do we, that harvest is a season. And so wherever the idea is that this is going to happen on one single day, chosen by somebody somewhere, is not what we have in mind at all. But sometime during the harvest season, there would be a gift day for this purpose, which should not, I would have hoped, have prevented congregations from maintaining traditions of, say, supporting the local food bank at harvest time as well. It seems to me, and I think it seemed to the stewardship folks themselves, that whatever time of the year you choose, you will clash with one of our festivals and perhaps special events that churches run and organised. But the idea of Thanksgiving and a Thanksgiving, an opportunity to give financially during the harvest season, probably seemed to them and seems to me to be the most advantageous time of the year to do it. And this year, hopefully, it will coincide with times when we are all able to return to our churches, and we will have a lot to give thanks for, that we'll actually be able to perhaps open our hymn books and sing. And so whatever Sunday or week or weekday congregations choose to do this, let it be up to them. We've suggested the harvest season.
Thank you very much, and I'm glad we had that opportunity to get these contributions. I'm told that technically that voting is still open, but you can. Hang on, sorry, someone else has come in. Andrea Boys, but it's after the convener has responded. So it's perhaps something worth mentioning that if you can get your request to speak in before I call the convener to respond to an amendment, so much the better. You can actually change your vote from how you voted earlier on section 17, and I'll give you a moment or two to, but the votes you cast are already in the system. I'll close the voting, and they're voted for section 17, 402, and against 90. The sections 18, 19 and 20 have been already carried by the fast track, and we have a new section proposed by the Reverend Anne Winning, 593. Anne?
Thank you, Moderator. 593 Winning. I'm grateful, first of all, to the convener for help with this deliverance. And I'd like to say briefly why it's there, because it might puzzle commissioners slightly. It arises from a report given in 2019 in which there was this proposal to look into the possibility of redirecting the proceeds from the sale of redundant church buildings. And at the present, these can really only go into a fabric fund. So we have come across a situation where, because of a union or a linkage, small congregations are struggling to meet ministry, mission, and costs for really serious endeavors, and yet they're building up a considerable fabric fund. And we will be very grateful for the Assembly Trustees to look again at this legislation. And really what I'm doing is, after the convener's very kind response to my question, encouraging him to bring it up the agenda, which I think was in his words, move it further up the agenda. And so I have brought this urging to the trustees, urge the Assembly Trustees, in consultation with all the relevant bodies, to expedite the exploration into allowing the proceeds from the sale of redundant buildings to be used more widely than at present, especially for purposes of ministry and mission. The wording seems a little odd. It's taken almost directly from the original 2019 deliverance. I believe this will be seconded by the Reverend John Arnold. Sorry, not Reverend, by an Elder John Arnold. I gave him a title because he's an interim moderator at the moment. And I would be grateful for the Assembly's approval of this, and also perhaps if the convener would take the opportunity to affirm what he said in answer to my question about moving this into a more urgent situation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Are there any, oh, sorry, it has been seconded, I've seen that's come up. Any questions to the Reverend Anne Winning on that? Does there anyone wish to speak on that new section? Scott Blythe, Netherlee, please, 241. I think maybe helpful while we're trying to get Scott, if the Principal Clerk reads what the new section actually says.
Moderator, Anne Winning's proposing add a new section 21, urge the Assembly Trustees in consultation with all relevant bodies to expedite the exploration into allowing the proceeds from the sale of redundant buildings to be used more widely than at present, especially for purposes of ministry and mission.
Thank you very much. Scott.
Moderator, I welcome the chance to speak to this. I want to thank Anne Winning for her proposal. I have to say I'm Scott Blythe from 241, Netherlee in Glasgow. I wrote to the clerk, the convener of the trustees, on this same issue during the last year, and I welcome the fact that if we do not deal with this matter, we could be creating the best possible catch-22 that the church has ever invented, in the sense that you may have congregations who wish to let go of buildings in order to be missional, but have not access to funds to therefore maybe hire a space that they may meet within, or even to carry on activities. So I would encourage this motion to the Assembly. Thank you.
Thank you. There doesn't appear to be any other names there, so I'll invite the convener to reply, please.
Moderator, this is one of the issues that has genuinely been affected by the pandemic. It has been largely the inability to meet face-to-face with many of the people who would be involved in what is a pretty complex issue that has held us back from carrying out this particular instruction which came from the Radical Action Plan. I can give the Commissioner assurance that we will try our very best to bring this up the agenda now, but it involves most directly the General Trustees, and it will take us into the realms of examining trust law and various regulations that we have within the General Assembly, but I'm assured by the convener of the Legal Questions Committee that if we can get the right people in the room and reach the kind of agreements that might take us forward in this, that the Legal Questions Committee would do all that they need to do, if they have to do anything, to make this possible. But Scott, Blythe is absolutely right. There are places where we could switch off the lights and run out of people before we run out of money or assets. And we really do have to address that with some degree of urgency. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'm now going to put to vote the new section, moved by the Reverend Anne Winning. Will you please have your buttons for and against at the ready? Voting is now open. Voting is closed. And I voted for 400 sorry, get so confused. Voting for 413, voting against 15. So that is a new section added to the deliverance. A number of commissioners have been asking how we might vote or not on the deliverance as a whole.
Supplementary
report? Oh, sorry, apologies. Sorry, supplementary report. How could I forget? Convener.
I have nothing further to add. Submit the report and move those deliverances.
Seconded.
Any questions on the supplementary report to the convener? Been no questions. I have no requests to speak so far on 1, 2, 3, 4, and 6, but I will open it up for anyone who wishes to register a request to speak on any of these sections of the supplementary report. I'll give you 30 seconds.
They're on the table already. Moderator, while we're waiting, at this point, I lay the accounts, annual report and accounts on the table, which I did so earlier under COVID regulations.
Thank you very much. Duly noted.
Moderator, I wonder if I could say to the Assembly that there is a problem with the hub at the moment. Yeah. We've lost the sections of the supplementary report. Whether that's the hand of fate, I don't know, but we'll work at restoring these if the Assembly could be patient with us.
I knew there was some reason I missed it. We just bear with us. But yeah, I think actually I've now got it up on my screen. So
Moderator, there are one or two videos, short videos of presbyteries work, which we thought we might be able to use it. Sorry. just as at home, moderators, there's a voice in my ear telling me things. So apparently the videos aren't queued up, so we'll just have to be patient and quiet and reflective and content ourselves for a while.
So you all know you've got the videos to look forward to at some future commercial break. If someone could give me a signal.
What sections are? Yeah.
Okay.
Come to the section.
Just go.
No.
Right. This may be a moment you just want to stretch your legs, because we've been sitting for a while since we returned. So if you want to stretch your legs.
Yes, and I wonder if the production team might like to use the holding slide while we take the time to get this sorted.
Perhaps for convenience, so you're not caught.
John, mask. Yes, thank you. So just for those in the hall, the sound is not going out on Zoom at the moment, and so I've asked that there's a holding slide put on as an image until we're ready, both with the text of the supplementary report, deliverance, and the sound is there. What's there? Yes, I think the sound's even fixed. I've actually. It's not. Yes, it's appeared now. But we're waiting for the sound. You'll tell us in the earpiece. They'll tell us in the earpiece. Stretch my legs. Easy, Dan. Well, easy, Dan. No idea how you do these things. So. Do we?
Have we read the other ones?
I'm not sure, Michael. If we've got sound back, we'll go shortly to the supplementary report, just give people a chance to regroup. So thank you all for your patience. These things happen, and I can assure you we've got a really good technical team here, and every effort is made, and hopefully that wasn't as long. Didn't feel quite as long. So we now have the sound back, we have the text of the supplementary report, and I think what I was saying earlier was that I have no requests to speak on 1, 2, 3, or 4. I will therefore allow 30 seconds for anyone to register a request to speak on 1, 2, 3, or 4. Otherwise, I will then proceed to approve them by means of the fast track. There are now no requests to speak on 2 and 3. So under the fast track procedure, I declare sections 2 and 3 approved. I have a request, and the convener indicated, convener, do you want to speak to the supplementary report?
No.
No. I therefore have a request on 1 from Scott Paget in Lanark. Scott?
Yes, thank you, moderator. Paget 198, I think I am. Yes. Oh, sorry, I should start my video. Sorry. Yes, hello. Paget 198. Thank you very much, moderator. It's just, I hadn't seen the supplementary report because of the shortness of the publications of stuff, so I hadn't got to it yet. I wanted to ask the convener, at the back of the supplementary report in table 8, it talks about young people and adherence within the church using the congregational statistical returns for 2020. And this is great. I'm hoping the convener would be able to give me a sense of whether that is about right for where we are, whether the numbers are low, or whether we are not doing enough. And I ask because the way I read it is the membership is about 300,000 and children under 17 is about 30,000, about 10%. So 1 in 10 members of the congregation would be 1 in 10 members of the congregation would be a young person. And I have no sense whether actually for the amount of money we put in and the resources we dedicate to young people, which the Blue Book has said we should do more of, is 1 in 10 a good amount for where we are just now and we want to get better at it? Or is it actually for we should be doing better with what we have already before we put more in? I hope that makes sense. Thank you.
Convener?
It doesn't make a lot of sense to me on the spot. I think that this is the kind of question about which we really would have preferred due notice, because the people who compile these statistics and the people who understand them best are the people who are better able to answer the questions, and we don't have them here with us in the team today. I have no reason to doubt the figures, though, although we do know that this year our contact with people of all ages has changed quite dramatically because of COVID-19, with some areas of the community we have increased our contact, and with other areas of the community that has decreased. So I have no reason to doubt the figures. I'm encouraged by the number of young people that are that are one way or another counted within the community of our church. I am concerned, of course, that in too many congregations there's no presence of young people. And in too many of our congregations, there have been no new commitments to faith, in some cases in years. And these are things that we have to address, and we have to address through some of the means that we've already been talking about today, not least the new ways in which we engage in mission and the new ways in which we grow the community of the church. But I can't really give a more detailed answer than that to what lies behind the statistics themselves without notice.
Thank you. An important issue of young people in the church. Can I therefore now take section 1 to a vote and ask that you press your buttons for or against, and voting is now open. Voting is closed, and that is approved by 435 votes to 2. As I said, 2 and 3 have been approved under the fast track, so we now come to section 4, for which I have a request to speak from Fiona Smith from Inverness. Fiona, please.
Thank you, Moderator. 583 Fiona Smith. I just wanted us to pause for a minute that we are noting this indicative budget. A huge amount of work goes on behind the scenes, and we're talking about many, many millions of pounds. A huge tribute goes to our finance, all the accountants, and to the Assembly trustees of trying to manage not only the budget of the church, but also of our social care and cross-reach with all the complexity. And I could see that we were just going to run through it and fast-track it. So I just wanted us to stop and look at it. And so I do have a question off the top of my head. The convener may feel that if only I'd had notice, I may be able to answer it, and I wholly understand that. But I do want us to pause, because finance is a real issue. And this budget and balancing this budget is a very difficult task. But the one wee question I have to the convener is, could he give me any indication of a bit more detail about the costs associated to the facilities management of 121 to 123 George Street? It rather stands out as a very large figure. And I would be grateful if I could have a further understanding of what is made up of those facilities management costs. And also, a second part to what I'd like to say is a bit like when we're always at our stated annual meetings and we present the accounts to our congregations, everybody gets blinded with it all. And I do wonder if the Assembly trustees may think about another way in which this could be presented to the General Assembly in the future that actually can help us all to engage in the more finer details of the budgeting process that you trustees have to do. So specific question about the facilities management, commending you for all your work and highlighting the fact that this is our budget. Thank you, Moderator.
Thank you very much. Convener?
If I could take the last part of that contribution first. This time last year, when we were thinking about preparing for a General Assembly that then didn't happen, we had in mind that we would use the Saturday or a part of the Saturday of the General Assembly to run something more of a seminar, so that those parts of our report, which year on year we glide over because they are technical, they're difficult, they're full of detail. We did want to spend time explaining more about how our money comes in and where it goes and how it goes out. And I still think that, that in the future, and perhaps through the possibility of running more webinars, for instance, that we do now have a means of helping those who really want to understand what lies behind the figures. We have a means of doing that, so we'll address ourselves to it. As to the cost of facilities management, it's really a staff cost, and that revolves around facilities management and those who work within that department, which involves and includes the reception staff, those who work in the print room, in telephony, and all these parts of the work of the building, and the maintenance, janitorial type of work that's done. I don't know if the team have managed to come up with a number, but we do know that all staffing costs, and staffing costs are the major part of our outgoing. And all I can say is that in a variety of ways, we have reduced the number of full-time equivalents working in the central administration and paid directly by the church and not by other parts of the church like the General Trustees or the Investors Trust and the Guild. We've reduced that dramatically to somewhere around 140 posts, full-time equivalent posts, which is down a long way from where we were 2 or 3 years ago. And we have to control our staffing costs. We have to control them within facilities as we have to control them within every department at the moment. And we have to work smarter. We have to ask people to concentrate on what are our priorities over against laying down some of the things that don't really or shouldn't really be on top of the list at the moment. And that's hard stuff. And we've done a lot of it over the last couple of years. It's not been easy for the staff. And I commend the staff for the way in which they've held up under the pressure of that. I wish we could say there would be no more of that, but there will be as we try to control costs and try to set priorities that are the priorities that fit what we really need to do as a church in these days.
Thank you very much. I have no other. That brings to the end of the discussion on Section 4. I therefore put Section 4 to a vote. Will you please press your buttons for or against, and voting is open. Voting is closed, and the Section 4 is approved by 425 votes to 4. We now move to Section 5. And I have a request to speak from Gordon Palmer of East Kilbride 328.
Thank you, Moderator. Palmer 328. Simply want to ask the Assembly to delete Section 5. So I think I probably need a seconder for that.
Moderator, Gordon is fortunate he doesn't need a seconder. What he's asking us to do is vote against Section 5. I think that's
okay.
how the mechanism works. So if you would advocate for us not voting for Section 5, and then the thing would be put to a vote.
Okay, that's fine. Yes, two reasons mainly. Firstly, the section seems to be saying, here's a discretionary allowance, but here's how we'd like you to spend it. It's a bit like saying, these are the countries you can go on holiday to, but please don't go on holiday. Now, I expect John Chalmers will say, and I'm grateful to John for helpful communication yesterday when I was asking him about this. I'm expecting him to say that presbyteries will still be free to use this discretionary allowance as they want. But nevertheless, a steer has been given. Influence has been tried here. Otherwise, there'd be no point in having it. So while we're saying that generally that we want more power to the presbyteries, we want presbytery to have more influence, here is a central control thing. Because I'm not sure if the discretionary allowance being used for M&M is actually for the benefit of the individual congregations who might be behind in payments, or whether it's a way of having the discretionary allowance move back into central funds. Either way, I think it goes against the trend that we're having to say, please give more influence to presbyteries. The second reason is also our trend has been to say, let's change, let's do new things, but when the financial situation has been difficult, it's the pioneering work that has very often been cut back on. And I fear that this could be an outcome here if the discretionary fund focuses on the M&M, then basically what we're doing is we're supporting the inherited model. Money's being taken away from the possibilities of using it for mission, for new work, in order to bail out something that's not working terribly well. So for both of these reasons, that it's discretionary but not discretionary, and therefore I think cutting back on presbytery's power and influence. And secondly, because it seems to me to open the door to further retrenchment and taking money away from new work, that I wish that the Assembly simply delete Section 5. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a request to speak from the Reverend Andrea Boys, Kinloch-Bervie.
Andrea Boys, 606. I just fully support what Gordon has said regards struggling, those congregations that are struggling financially. The use of the mission and ministries discretionary allowance has been used in many different ways across presbyteries to encourage and develop and envision new actions within churches. It's not always necessary within those struggling financially. Churches struggle financially for various reasons, not just COVID. Churches have been struggling because of a forward-looking vision for what could happen and their outreach as well. So I would agree with Gordon to take this out of the section.
There being no further requests to speak, can I invite Dr. Chalmers to respond, please?
Moderator, there is evidence that some presbyteries use their discretionary fund or discretionary allowance to engage in innovative mission-related work and projects. And there's nothing about this deliverance which suggests they should not continue to use the money in that way, especially where they've committed to projects over a number of years. There is also, however, significant evidence that many presbyteries do nothing except reallocate this money across in a proportional way across the presbytery. And they're entitled to do that as well. And when they do that, one way or another, the money in some ways comes back into the system and helps us to deal with the financial situation as we face it. We are not, by this deliverance, saying that presbyteries can no longer do imaginative things with their funds if that's what they want to do with them. But Gordon's right. I am going to say that we are living in extraordinary times when we have set a budget this year, which the kind of budget the church has never seen before, where we have asked only from congregations for enough to pay the costs of the ministries fund, the stipends and salaries of those who work in parishes. And every other penny of the church's work is going to be paid for this year out of reserves. And when a Presbyterian church finds itself in that sort of situation, it seems to me to be a principle of Presbyterian polity, that we should think, therefore, very carefully about what we do with the surplus that may be in the system. And that is why we are saying to presbyteries just now, if you don't have some urgent and imaginative and ongoing project that needs to be supported, remember that your national church and congregations across the church need to be supported just now. I have no way of saying, in fact, that what we take out of reserves this year will be limited to £11 million. But I have a way of saying to presbyteries, through this deliverance, think about your Presbyterian respect for and understanding of the whole system, and where it's possible, put some of that money back into the system.
Thank you, Dr. Chalmers. We will now proceed to vote on section 5. Will you please press your buttons for or against, and voting opens now. Thank you. The numbers seem to have stabilised there. And therefore close the voting. and declare that Section 5 is approved by 304 votes to 142. We now proceed to Section 6, where there have been requests to speak. And therefore, can I call Julie Rennick from Falkirk, please, Julie, and will Donald Corkindale please stand by?
Yes, Moderator, thank you. I actually feel I should apologise because as the convener of the nominating committee, I should know the answer to this question and I should have noticed it sooner so I could have given the convener advance notice. However, it is my understanding that trustees, certainly the initial tranche of trustees were elected for a single term only, and according to the remit, the trustees first appointed shall be eligible to serve a second term after an interval of 3 years. So I'm just querying why Anne Nelson is getting a second term. So my apologies for not knowing the answer to this myself.
Thank you. Donald McCorkindale. Oh.
Do you want to answer that question first?
It's on another point.
Right, if it's another point, I'll...
Yeah. Anne Nelson was not one of the original trustees. She was appointed to serve the remainder of the term of a trustee who had to resign. And so as such, she came onto the trustee body at a separate time and was eligible to serve a second term.
Thank you. Mr. McCorkindale.
Thank you, Moderator. I am an Assembly trustee. I should have noticed this earlier. I had mentioned it in Assembly trustee meetings. I think we should also be adding that we homologate the interim appointment of Philip Ziegler that was made since the last October. There was permission given to make the interim appointment, but I think we should now be noting that and minuting it. So,
I can't quite remember the terms of the decision that was made in October. Obviously, we assumed that it had given us the power to appoint him at an interim point following a resignation. But if it has to be homologated here, then I'm happy to move that.
I think he has to be appointed here. I think he wasn't appointed according to the minute from October. My memory, and this is really speaking off the cuff, is that the Constitution allows the trustees to fill a gap until the next General Assembly can appoint somebody.
Right. Well, if we have omitted that, my apologies, and we should add it.
Can I perhaps take advice as to whether an amendment can
give us a second. I suspect.
To clarify how long the appointment was for.
Yes, exactly.
And I'll need to be reminded how to spell Philip's surname for the minute.
Yes, we know how to spell it. If you could just give us a moment, Moderator, while we check the Constitution, unless...
4 minute leave.
I believe we do have to add approve the appointment of Philip Ziegler.
For how long?
For how long? I'll wait for another message to come.
I'm just wondering if this might be an opportunity to have a good news video. And many thanks to the Presbytery of Moray for their very inspiring good news. And I'm sure the need arises, there are more good news stories to tell in the course of this assembly. We now have a further addendum or amendment to section 6, which I will read out. It is to add at the end of section 6 and approve the interim appointment of Philip Ziegler until the General Assembly of 2022. Convener, have you anything seconded?
I'm happy with that. I'm not sure it's an interim appointment. I think it's simply the appointment of Philip Ziegler until the Assembly of 2022.
Yes, I think he's being appointed to take up the remainder of a term of a trustee who had to resign from his post, and so the term runs to the end of the General Assembly of 2022. I think we're just simply appointing him until then. The interim appointment was made by the trustees to cover the gap.
That's right.
It's not interim. The word interim, do we?
Yes, we'll change that.
We will remove the word interim. We'll get this up. We'll give you time. It's important that we get these things right, and thanks to Donald for spotting that. Just ask you to bear with us. That's it now. It's now up, and it's to add at the end and approve the appointment of Philip Ziegler as an Assembly trustee until the General Assembly of 2022. Many thanks for getting that in order, and that is moved and seconded. So we now need to vote on the amendment.
I think we vote for the amendment.
Vote for the amendment first.
Vote for the amendment, then vote for the
section. Yes, vote for the amendment first. Can you please people show for or against the amendment to add the words relating to the approval of the appointment of Philip Ziegler as an Assembly trustee? Voting is open. I think just bear with us, because I think at the moment it's showing section A6 and not on the amendment. So that's it. I'm told that's it now. So you vote for or against on the amendment. That one is clearly carried, and we'll hold that in our head as we come to vote on section 6. We've had debate. Convener, was there any further response you wish to make on section 6? No. Thank you. The question now is section 6 as amended by the words we have just voted to add. All those for and against, please press your buttons now, and voting is open. Voting is closed, and they're voted for 410 and against 5. So that section as amended is approved. I'm now going to ask the Principal Clerk to advise on where we are, given that section 9 of the original report was not dealt with until, and will not be dealt with until next week.
Yes, Moderator. Section 9 is being held over and will be taken within the deliverance of the Faith Nurture Forum, which is on Tuesday afternoon. I'm suggesting that we deal with the deliverance as a whole question at this stage, so that we round off the Assembly Trustees' business. to me, this means that all we discuss then is section 9 on Tuesday, rather than opening up the possibility of further Assembly trustee business being dealt with on Tuesday. And I think that would be neater if we did it that way, and we therefore cleared with the Assembly that this is the end of trustee business other than section 9. And so I would ask you to ask the Assembly to approve the deliverance as a whole, on the understanding that we've not yet approved section 9.
I therefore so ask the Assembly that we approve the deliverance as a whole, on the clear understanding that section 9 will be dealt with in the Faith Nurture Forum report on Tuesday. That has been seconded.
We just take that as done.
And that is, and that the deliverance, subject to that understanding, is therefore carried. Principal Clerk.
Moderator, in our first day enthusiasms earlier today, we skipped past item 19 in the order of business, and this is the minutes of the appeal hearings before the Ministers' Appeal Panel, and I simply ask that the General Assembly note these.
Thank you.
That's it. Yeah.
That therefore concludes the business for today.